Hi viewers, and welcome to episode 4 on Project XB, where we're going to tackle the wiring and also fit up our Astra power steering pump on the XB. So let's get into it. As the wiring harness for this vehicle is also 45 years old, it went through a thorough restoration process itself. The reason being is that over its journey it had a number of scotch locks and accessories fitted to it that are less than ideal, so all of that needed to be deleted and then the restoration process could begin. The restoration process involved checking to make sure that there were no voltage drops or any extra resistance in any of the wires. I also replaced all the globe holders for both the indicators and the stop tail lights, and also made provisions for all the accessories that we want to run in this vehicle, that being the TS Astra power steering pump, a reverse camera, and also an OEM spec dash cam. Once this was finished, I also added a relay and secondary fuse block. This was required to make sure that there was no high current devices that are being driven by the original OEM spec switches. So we had the switches restored, and then the relays are now making it so that the switches only need to put in a small amount of current to operate the high current devices such as the headlight beams and also the driving lights. So that's the wiring harness sorted, so let's go and fit it. And this is the aforementioned relay and fuse block. We'll talk about how all this spaghetti all works very shortly. The relay and fuse block was mounted under the dash. I've already passed through the wiring through a lot of the body cavities, so now it's just a time to terminate it. So what I'll do is I will just make this a time lapse. Welcome to another Mac Badger Chalk and Talk. In this session we're going to look at how an automotive relay works. In simple terms, an automotive relay is an electronically operated switch. The most common automotive relay used is an electromechanical operated switch. Automotive relays employ an electromagnetic device to mechanically move a switch to make or break an electrical circuit. The type of relays most frequently used in the automotive industry are known as a standard relay. Looking inside a relay, we can see that it is constructed of a coil of wire that's wrapped around a soft iron core. This is known as a solenoid. It also has a set of high current contacts. When the electromagnet or solenoid is energized, those high current contacts are closed. Let's have a look at our pins and how we go about wiring up our relay. So we've got pin 86, pin 30, pin 85 and pin 87. Pin 86 is what we wire our input into. In this case it is our headlight switch. Pin 85 is wired directly to ground. Pin 30 has fused battery voltage, and pin 87 has our output, in this case the headlight. Pin 30 and 87 are connected via the high current contacts, whereas pin 86 and 85 wire the electromagnet. The way it works is when we turn our headlight switch to the on position, it energizes the electromagnet, which closes the contacts between pins 30 and 87, allowing the light to turn on as the current is passing from battery positive direct to the output for the headlight. So let's have a look at how it works on our relay block. So coming in from our fuse block, we've got our 12 volt constant that goes into pin 30. Pin 85 goes direct to ground. We've got our headlight on input, which goes into pin 86, and when that is switched on, then we get an output from pin 87, which turns our headlight on. Okay, so our wiring and our lights are all installed, so it's time to go and connect the battery negative, and then we'll test and make sure that our lights are all working. So here goes nothing. Now I'm just going to go and plug in our Astra power steering pump, and what I'll do is I'll take a bit of a close-up and just run you through how I mounted and plumbed that thing in, and hopefully if I've got it right, it should all work.
So behind the front guard, this is what it looks like with the splash shield taken away. What we have is we've got our TS Astra power steering pump. The TS Astra power steering pump has got a TS Astra power steering bracket. So if you're going to do this on an XB, I suggest that you take the bracket as well. All we've done is modify it slightly and put in a couple of riv nuts just so that we can mount it to the chassis and also to the bodywork. That's not going anywhere. The other thing that you'll notice there is we've got some Speedflow 490 power steering hose and fittings, and what we're able to do there is make up our own power steering hose. So you can see it goes up and around and then down. So the reason we've got it mounted the way that it is and the lines routed the way that they are is so that it will not get any interference from the front wheel and tyre assembly. The other thing that we've had to be careful of when we're building this is that the bend radius of the hose is sufficient, because if we go too tight then it's going to crimp the hose, and of course that is a '6 hose in case anybody was wondering. The return hose is quite simply just some 3/8 power steering hose, and that is cable tied to the high pressure hose. Going through the inner skirt there, we've got some notch head fittings, and they make it look really pretty, and also make sure that there are no sharp edges for the hose to catch as well, because they will move and flex when the lines pressurize and depressurize. Okay, so looking at the steering box itself as we sort of come round, what we can see is we've got our 490 hose that comes into a 90-degree fitting into the steering box, and the steering box has got another fitting that goes and screws into it, which is an inverted taper one, and that's also available from Speedflow as well. The return hose just goes through it. You can see it going through the actual notch head fitting, and we saw what happened on the other side. So that's pretty much it. It was all very simple and easy to do. The biggest drama, I think, was probably organising and working out how to delay the ignition switch to give it a trigger so that it would work as soon as the ignition was switched to the on position.
Let's have a look at some Astra power steering pump electrical wizardry using a Nava time delay relay. So first up, let's have a look at the actual power steering pump itself. So when I grabbed this, I grabbed the brackets, I grabbed the hydraulic lines and all the electrical wiring, because I wasn't too sure how I was going to go about it to start with. However, if we have a look at how it is wired in terms of the OEM, you can see that it's got a thick red and a thick brown wire. The thick red wire is fused at 80 amps and the thick brown is a chassis ground. Now the pump will draw around 15 amps when idling and between 15 and 35 amps when it's steering, and it will pull almost up to 75 amps at full steering lock. So obviously that is the reason why they went with an 80 amp fuse. To wire it up as per an OEM, the brown and white wire is used for diagnostics, so in our case we omit that wire. The black wire is used for switched ignition on, whereas the blue with the white trace wire is used for charging, and that's connected to the alternator. When the black and the blue and white wire get voltage to them, it will command the power steering pump to start to operate. Some people join the black and blue with white trace wires together to supply 12 volts at the same time to both of the wires. This will work and the power steering pump will start by winding up slowly to speed. However, it will delay your power assist by about 10 to 15 seconds after you switch the ignition on. Now, this is not ideal for my application. To make it factory-like, where full assist is available as soon as the engine is running, or in my case, when the ignition is switched to the on position, I connected the black wire to switched ignition on voltage. However, I delayed the switched ignition on voltage to the blue and white wire by 2 seconds. This was achieved by using a Nava relay timer. The way that it works is that we have a fused 12 volt constant going into pin 30. Pin 31 is wired directly to ground, whereas our ignition on input is wired directly into pin 15. The relay is timed so that it will not close the contact between pin 30 and pin 87 for a total of 2 seconds before providing our ignition on output.
Okay, so looking at this, we can see that our crane fireball is all functioning and the light is on, telling us that it's working, so ignition module is good. You can see in there, as we're coming around, you can see that's where our fuse and relay box lives. And we can access the fuses through this blinking panel here. You can see that I've also gone and fitted a USB and MP3 player stereo. So that's just a mechless drive, so it sits back a bit further so we can put a dummy 8-track stereo fascia in front of it. And our dash wiring is all good, so everything is looking pretty good inside as far as the dash harness goes. So there you have it. All of our lights and our accessories are all working. So if you enjoyed this video, please like, share and subscribe, and we'll catch you on the next one.